When I lost my job, my mill gave my husband an envelope labeled Emergency Fund. Inside was a list of conditions. Separate accounts only. She needs to check with you before spending and limit her credit access. He showed it to me like it was a kind offer. I said nothing until we paid off our debts with my savings from before the marriage. Then I sent her a receipt with a note. Your conditions are no longer needed. She pays her own way. I was standing in our tiny kitchen in Austin, still in my wrinkled button-down from the job I'd just been laid off from, when my husband, Mark, slid an envelope across the counter like he was offering me a warm casserole from his mother. It's from my mom, he said, almost proud. She called it an emergency fund. The envelope was cream-colored and heavy, like the kind you'd send a wedding invitation in. My hands were still shaking from the HR meeting, from the long drive home where I had to pull over twice just to breathe, and now this. I opened it because I needed something, anything, to ground me. Inside wasn't money. It was a list. A typed list. Bullet points, bolded headers, and my name at the top like a case file. Conditions for financial stability during difficult times. I still remember the first 3 lines because they were printed so cleanly they branded themselves into my skull. Separate accounts only. She needs to check with you before spending. Limit her credit access. There were more, too many more. Things like encourage her to meal plan, monitor her shopping habits. She should not travel without approval, and the worst one, the one that made my throat close up. Consider whether she's prepared for long-term financial partnership. She, not me, not even my name, just she. Like I was some stray dog they were deciding whether to keep. Mark stood there waiting for my reaction, eyebrows lifted like he honestly thought I'd say thank you. He held the envelope out again, like I might have missed something, like maybe sympathy was hidden between the lines. I could feel the heat rising in my face, but inside I was ice, because somehow this hurt worse than losing my job. I wasn't supposed to cry, not over this, not in front of him, so I didn't. I just folded the paper back up, slid it into the envelope, and handed it to him. Got it, I said, calm, too calm, like I was talking to a coworker, not my husband. He took it as agreement. He actually smiled. That night, while he reheated leftovers and told me how we'd figure out a system, I sat on the couch staring at the wall and felt something inside me shift. Not snap, just shift. Like a plate of the earth sliding into a new position after a quake. I didn't argue, didn't protest. I didn't even mention the savings account I'd had long before we married, the one I'd kept untouched because it was my safety net, my if everything falls apart stash. It wasn't until months later, after I found a new job, after we used my savings to pay off the credit cards and the car note and the medical bills, after I quietly erased every last debt hanging over us, that I remembered that envelope again. It happened the night I hit transfer and moved the final payment. The moment the balance blinked to 0, that same icy calm from the kitchen washed over me. But this time it felt sharp, focused. Like I finally understood something I hadn't let myself admit. I grabbed my phone, opened a blank email, and typed one simple line. Your conditions are no longer needed. She pays her own way. And then I attached the receipt. What happened next is where everything truly started to unravel, because my mother-in-law didn't take that message the way I expected. And neither did Mark. Before all this blew up, I actually liked Linda, my mother-in-law. Or at least I tried to. I met her in Round Rock during a family barbecue 3 years ago, when Mark and I were still in that early, stupidly hopeful phase where everything feels like a preview of the life you think you're building together. She hugged me too long, commented on my natural hips, and fed me potato salad like I was a rescue bird learning to eat. I figured she was just one of those intense Texas moms who love hard and meddle harder. When Mark proposed the next year, she cried harder than I did, loud, heaving sobs like someone had just handed her the keys to the kingdom. Looking back, I don't think those tears were about joy. I think it was something closer to triumph. It didn't really click at the time because I was too busy working, planning the future, and feeling genuinely excited. I'd been at my marketing job in Austin for 5 years. I had my own apartment, my own insurance, my own savings. I wasn't rich, but I was proud of myself. I'd built everything from scratch after leaving a messy childhood behind in Corpus Christi. Being independent wasn't just a preference, it was survival. Mark knew all this. He used to say it was one of the things he admired most about me. But after we got married, little things started happening that didn't feel like little things. Anytime we visited his parents' place, Linda would pull him into corners like she needed a sidebar before dealing with me. If I bought something, new jeans, groceries, a replacement charger, she'd make a comment. Wow, must be nice. Maybe stick to essentials. Does she really need that? Not you, she. It grated, but I told myself it didn't matter. She didn't know me. She didn't know my history, or that I'd never leaned on anyone financially. Honestly, I wasn't even mad. I was embarrassed. Because somewhere along the way, I started feeling like I had to prove that I wasn't the kind of woman who'd drain her husband's bank account or bury us under debt. And then the layoff happened. It wasn't dramatic, no screaming, no slammed doors, just a short meeting with restructuring and unfortunately, and we'll provide references. I walked out with a box and a severance packet and the sense that my balance had been wiped out, not my finances, but my footing. The first person I called was Mark. He picked up on the third ring and said, "Damn, okay, we'll figure it out." Not comforting, not unkind, just managerial. The second person who heard about it was Linda, apparently. I didn't know Mark had told her until that envelope appeared on our kitchen counter. And the thing was, it wasn't just the conditions. It was the tone. The implication that losing my job made me irresponsible, that I couldn't be trusted, that I was a liability who needed oversight. I swallowed it all because I told myself it didn't matter. We'd be fine. I'd find another job. We'd get through the rough patch. I didn't want to be the dramatic wife who picked fights when everything was already fragile. So I kept quiet. I listened when Mark talked about budgeting systems. I didn't argue when he repeated some of her lines, almost word for word. I even let him believe that he was guiding things, even though it was my savings that kept us afloat. But silence doesn't mean forgiveness. And once the debts were cleared and that email was sent, I realized something I probably should have seen earlier. Linda hadn't just overstepped. She'd been preparing for something I hadn't understood yet. The morning after I sent that email, I woke up to silence, the loud, charged kind that feels like a storm crouched on the edge of the roof. Mark was already in the kitchen, standing stiffly by the coffee maker, phone face down on the counter like it had burned him. "You emailed my mom," he said without turning around. There was no good morning, no hey, just that, flat. Accusatory, like I'd keyed his car in the night. I sat at the table, pulled my hair into a messy knot and said, "Yeah, I did." He finally turned and his whole face looked pinched. "Why would you do that?" I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the question was so upside down. "Why do you think?" He didn't answer. Instead, he slid his phone toward me. "She called 7 times. She texted me all night. She thinks you're attacking her." I didn't touch the phone. All I did was send her a receipt. "And a note," he shot back. "You'd think I wrote a manifesto, but no, it was a one-line truth. A fact." That's when I realized he wasn't upset because she was offended. He was upset because I'd gone outside the script. I wasn't playing the role he and his mother had quietly decided I should fill. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed again and he snatched it up. This time he turned away from me and answered. "Mom, please stop. Yes, I saw. No, she's right here. Mom, I am handling it. No, she didn't mean it like mom. Stop. Just stop." He hung up and pressed his palms to his eyes like he could rub the whole situation away. Then he said something I wasn't prepared for. "She didn't mean the conditions as restrictions. She was trying to help." There it was. The word he kept using. Help, help monitor me, help limit me, help decide what I spent money on, help control me. "Mark," I said slowly, "your mom wrote a list of rules about how you should manage me." He opened his mouth to argue, closed it, then tried again. "She just wants us to be smart. You were stressed. You weren't thinking clearly. And she knows how to handle money." "I know how to handle money," I snapped before I could stop myself. "Did you forget whose savings we've been using for months?" He flinched. Silence stretched between us, thick and awkward. He grabbed his mug and walked out of the kitchen. Later that afternoon, while he was in the shower, his phone lit up again. This time with a preview I couldn't ignore because it flashed across the whole screen. "Mark, this is why I warned you. She doesn't understand partnership." Warned you. My stomach dropped. I wasn't snooping. I didn't open the message. But that one line felt like a window into something I hadn't seen clearly before. This wasn't a reaction to me losing my job. This had been brewing long before the layoff. And once I saw it, I started noticing other things. The way he double-checked receipts before tossing them. How he'd casually mention what I'd spent at Target like it was a point of concern. How he'd started saying, "my money," instead of "our money." Even though the bills were being paid by the account I'd built long before he came into my life. That night we sat on opposite ends of the couch, pretending to watch TV. He didn't touch me, didn't even look at me, and something heavy settled inside my chest, not sadness, not anger, just clarity. Cold, simple clarity. This wasn't about a job loss. This was about control, and I had just disrupted the balance that allowed it. But the real shift happened 2 days later, when I got a call from someone I never expected, someone who told me a piece of information that made every red flag suddenly snap into place. And once I heard it, I knew that envelope had never been about help at all. 2 days later, I was sitting in my car in the HEB parking lot when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me, maybe instinct, maybe exhaustion, made me swipe to answer. "Is this Mark's wife?" a woman asked. Her voice was soft but strained. "Yes," I said slowly. "Who's this?" There was a long pause, the kind where you can hear someone deciding whether to tell the truth. "My name is Jenna," she said. "I work at Lone Star Credit Union and I've met your husband. Several times." My stomach twisted. "Is there a problem with the account?" Another pause. "I wasn't sure if I should call," she said, "but after he came in again this morning, something didn't feel right." Again, my palms were sweating now. "What did he come in for?" When she answered, it felt like the ground beneath me tilted. "He asked us, again, to freeze your access to the joint account, and he requested to open a secondary checking account under only his name. He said it was for marital financial protection." I felt my mouth go dry. "He said that?" I whispered. "Yes," she said gently. "And he brought a document last time, a typed list. It looked like guidelines. His mother's name was at the top. We assumed you knew." My vision actually blurred for a second. "The envelope," she kept going. "He also asked if we could notify him anytime you made a transaction over $50. I leaned forward, head in my hands, breathing like the air had gotten thicker. "I shouldn't be telling you this," she admitted. "But something feels off. The way he talks about you," she hesitated. "It doesn't match the financial activity, all the deposits into your accounts. They're from you, not him." She didn't know about my savings. She didn't know I'd been the reason our debts were gone. But she didn't need to. "Thank you," I finally said, though my voice barely worked. I need a minute." After we hung up, I sat in that parking lot for almost half an hour, staring at the steering wheel while a hollow, nauseating understanding settled into me. The conditions in that envelope weren't just suggestions. They were instructions, and Mark had already been following them, closing accounts, monitoring spending, trying to limit my access to money I earned, not because of the layoff, but because they had planned it. Mother and son, quietly, long before I ever lost my job, I drove home on autopilot. When I walked in, Mark was at the table, typing on his laptop like everything was normal. I watched him for a moment, how calm he looked, how comfortable, how certain he was that I'd stay in the dark. "Your mom emailed me again," he said without looking up. "I told her we'd talk tonight." I didn't answer. I just stared at him. He finally looked up. "What?" I swallowed hard. "When were you planning to tell me you tried to freeze the joint account?" The way he jerked, just a tiny twitch, told me everything. He stood slowly, like he needed height to regain control of the conversation. "Who told you that?" I didn't blink. "Is it true?" His face tightened. "My mother and I are trying to protect." "Protect who, Mark?" I said, my voice cracking on the last word. "Because it sure as hell isn't me." He opened his mouth, closed it, then snapped. "You're being dramatic." And that was the moment, right there, that I realized something terrifyingly simple. This man wasn't confused. He wasn't misguided. He wasn't caught between his wife and his mother. He was choosing a side. And it wasn't mine. But the worst part wasn't that he did it. It was why he did it. And I was about to learn that truth in a way that would split my understanding of our marriage clean in half. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of fear, because of clarity. The kind that shows up when the last bit of denial finally burns off and you're left staring at the truth with no filter to soften it. By the time the sun came up, I'd already made coffee, packed a small bag, and pulled out a notebook I hadn't touched since college. A plain, spiral-bound thing with a dented corner. I opened it and wrote one sentence at the top of the first page. I will not let them control me. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't poetic. It was a mission statement. Mark came into the kitchen looking hungover, even though he hadn't had a drop to drink. His eyes were puffy, his hair sticking out, and he glanced at my packed bag with the same expression you'd give a smoke alarm before it goes off. "Where are you going?" he asked. "I'm taking a break," I said. "I'm staying at Mia's for a few days." He laughed once, a short, humorless bark. "Because my mom tried to help." "You're really doing this?" "Your mom tried to control me," I said, "and you helped her." He opened his mouth to fight, but I held up a hand. "Mark, I know about the bank accounts." His whole posture changed, like someone tightened invisible strings in his shoulders. He didn't confess. He didn't apologize. He just said, "You shouldn't be discussing our finances with strangers." And that was it. No remorse, no shock. Just annoyance that I found out. I didn't argue. There was nothing left to argue about. "I'll be back to get the rest of my things once I figure out what I'm doing," I said quietly. When I grabbed my keys, he said, "You're blowing this out of proportion." I looked him dead in the eye. "No. I'm finally seeing it in proportion." He didn't follow me out. The second I got to Mia's apartment in South Austin, I broke. Not loud, not dramatic, just a silent, shaking collapse into her arms while she whispered, "What did he do? Tell me everything." And I did, all of it, the envelope, the conditions, the secret account, the spending surveillance, the credit freeze attempt, the fact that he had been planning this protection long before I'd ever lost my job. By the time I finished, Mia was pacing the living room like she was ready to burn someone's house down. She's been my best friend since freshman year at UT, fierce, loyal, all teeth when someone hurts me. "Okay," she said finally, stopping in front of me. "You need a plan, not a rant, a plan." So we spent the next 6 hours building one. Step 1, secure my finances. I called the credit union, spoke with a supervisor, and moved every remaining dollar of my personal savings into a brand new account under my name only. I froze my credit. I changed every online banking password. Step 2. Get documentation. I requested written summaries of the freeze attempts and monitoring requests he'd made. They agreed because his actions directly impacted my account access. Step 3. Secure housing options. Mia offered her place, but I wanted independence. We found a month-to-month rental in East Austin 10 minutes from my new job. I applied that afternoon. Step 4. Contact an attorney, not to file anything, not yet. Just to understand what rights I had and what steps I should take to protect myself financially before confronting him again. Step 5. Prepare the reveal, because I wasn't just leaving. I wanted him, and especially his mother, to see what I saw now. Their assumptions, their planning, their quiet belief that I was someone they could mold, monitor, and manage. But the plan shifted, dramatically, 2 days later when I came back to the house to grab paperwork and found something on Mark's desk. Something that changed the entire narrative. Something that made the envelope look like a warm-up. Because it turned out this wasn't just about control. It was about money, my money. And the reason behind it was so cold and calculated it made me feel physically sick. I went back to the house on a Thursday afternoon when I knew Mark would still be at work. I just needed a few things: tax documents, my passport, the box of old pay stubs I kept for emergencies. I wanted to be in and out in 10 minutes. But when I walked into the office, I saw his laptop left open on the desk. Mark never left his laptop open. He was obsessive about closing it, locking it, flipping it face down like he was hiding state secrets instead of fantasy football stats. The screen was black asleep, but not locked. All I had to do was tap the spacebar. I didn't want to. I told myself it wasn't my business anymore. I told myself I'd rise above it. But then I remembered the envelope, the attempted account freeze, the credit union calls. So I tapped the spacebar. An email window popped up. He'd been drafting a message, not to his mother, to a financial planner. The subject line made the bottom drop out of my stomach. Marriage asset allocation strategy, urgent. I clicked, and there it was. A full, detailed request asking a financial advisor how to legally reclassify premarital savings as community property, and how to reduce the risk of loss in the event of marital separation. My savings. He wasn't just controlling spending. He was planning, actively planning, to make a claim on the nest egg I'd built before I ever even met him. I scrolled further. The email kept going. My mother has been guiding me on this. We agree that her conditions were meant to help stabilize my wife's tendencies, but she reacted poorly. I need to secure our resources before she makes decisions that could affect my long-term financial security. Tendencies. Reacted poorly. Secure our resources. I felt sick. He was rewriting the story, framing me as irresponsible, unstable, a financial risk. He was laying groundwork, documenting a narrative, preparing for a future where he could legally justify taking half of everything, even the money he never earned. But that wasn't the twist. The twist came when I saw the attachment, a PDF. Projected Distribution Plan L. Watson, his mother's name. My hands shook as I opened it. It was a spreadsheet, detailed, color-coded. A breakdown of my savings, my actual savings, divided into future allocations. Portion for Mark's retirement portion for a down payment on their planned duplex. Mills suite included. Portion for future children, portion for family emergency reserves. And then the note that turned my blood cold. Once we have access, transfer immediately into joint account to avoid complications. Once we have access. Access they did not have. Access they were plotting to get. I sank into Mark's desk chair, shaky and cold. The room suddenly felt too small, like the air had thickened. I stared at that spreadsheet and realized something horrifying. The conditions weren't about budgeting. The account monitoring wasn't about responsibility. The freeze attempts weren't about stability. They were building a case, a paper trail, a narrative in which I was irresponsible, emotional, chaotic, a woman who needed oversight, whose money needed to be safeguarded by the stable half of the marriage. It hit me then, all at once. They didn't plan to protect themselves if I left. They were preparing to make sure that when the marriage ended, which they clearly expected, they'd walk away with as much of my financial foundation as possible. And they wanted it clean, documented, justified. I closed the laptop. My hands were trembling, but my mind had never been clearer. This wasn't about losing control of a marriage. This was about losing control of me. And suddenly, my careful, measured plan wasn't enough. I needed something bigger, sharper. Something that would end this on my terms, permanently. But before I could decide how, I discovered something even darker. Something that explained why Linda had pushed for this from the start. And once I learned her reason, every word she'd ever said to me made horrifying sense. I didn't learn the truth from Mark. I didn't learn it from an argument, or a slip-up, or from going through more of his things. I learned it from his sister. Out of everyone in that family, she was the only one who'd ever seemed genuinely warm to me. Not clingy, not calculating, just tired. Quiet. A woman who kept her distance from the gravitational pull of her mother. She called me the morning after I found the spreadsheet. Her voice was shaky in a way I'd never heard before. "I heard you left the house," she said. I thought you should know something Mom won't ever admit." I stepped outside Mia's apartment to talk, pacing the sidewalk like the cement might steady me. "What is it?" I asked. She was silent for a long time, and when she finally spoke, her voice had that brittle edge people get when the truth has been sitting inside them too long. "Mom told Mark to marry someone like you." I felt my whole chest tighten. "Someone like me? You have savings," she said. "A stable job, no debt, a clean credit history, no complicated family baggage that would show up on paperwork. Mom calls it low-risk wife material." The words hit like a slap. She kept going, softly, like she hated every syllable coming out of her mouth. "Last year, before your wedding, Mom told Mark he'd never get ahead on his own, that he needed a partner who brought financial stability into the marriage. Someone who already had their life together so he wouldn't have to build everything from scratch. She said women like that are assets." My stomach turned. Assets. The same word people use for stocks, for property, for things. I leaned against a parked car because my legs suddenly didn't feel steady. "She pushed him to propose when she found out how much you had saved," his sister continued. "He didn't tell you, but Mom pulled his credit report and showed it to him. She told him that marrying someone financially secure was the best chance he had at a good future." My throat felt tight. "He knew about my finances before we even discussed merging anything." "Yes," she whispered. She made him look them up. She said a man needs to know what he's investing in. Investing. Like I was a mutual fund. His sister exhaled shakily. "And when you lost your job, Mom panicked. She said the asset might become a liability. That if you slipped, everything she planned would collapse. That's when she wrote the envelope. She wanted Mark to protect the investment. Protect the investment. I couldn't breathe. His sister wasn't done. She's done this before, she said quietly. With my dad, with me, with every relationship Mark has ever had. She tries to leverage people, she tracks them. She manipulates their finances. But you, she started again. You were her biggest plan, her long-term strategy. She wanted you woven into our family so she could restructure everything around your stability. It hit me then, like snapping into focus. Linda never believed I needed protection. She believed I was the protection, a buffer, a wallet, a safety net disguised as a daughter-in-law. And when I lost my job, even temporarily, I wasn't a person she cared about. I was a destabilized asset, a risk she needed to manage, a resource she feared might slip away. My relationship, my marriage, my future, none of it was built on love. It was built on extraction. Cold, calculated, strategic extraction. And suddenly, every warning sign I'd ignored made perfect sense. Her obsession with my spending, her comments about responsibility, her fixation on smart marriages, her invasive questions before the wedding, her insistence on documentation, her constant monitoring. She hadn't been protecting her son. She had been managing her investment portfolio. I wasn't the problem. I was the plan. And that was the moment, standing outside on cracked Austin pavement, clutching my phone like it might anchor me, that I felt something deep and steady settle inside me. Not rage, not heartbreak. Resolve. Because I finally understood exactly what they wanted. And I knew exactly how to take it away from them. For good, I didn't rush. That was the key. People like Linda and people like Mark, who orbit around someone like her, count on panic. They expect you to react fast, to make messy choices, to lose your footing so they can claim you were unstable all along. So I moved slowly, calmly, precisely. I gave myself 1 full week. 1 week of sleeping at Mia's, building a case file, collecting every document, every email, every attempted account freeze, every spreadsheet, every bank statement showing exactly whose money had paid off all those debts. 1 week of speaking to an attorney who looked over the financial planner email and said, with a tight little smile, "You're in an excellent position. Everything is in your name, and all payments came from separate property. They don't have a claim on a single penny." 1 week of transferring every remaining asset into accounts they didn't even know existed. And during that week, I didn't contact Mark. Not once. Silence is a kind of power people don't expect from the person they tried to control. By the 8th day, everything was ready. I drove to the house one last time. The air inside felt stale, like the place had been holding its breath since I left. Mark was in the living room, pacing, his shirt wrinkled and his hair unwashed. He looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but in presence. Like all the certainty he'd worn like armor had been peeled away. "You finally came home," he said. "We need to talk." I walked past him and set a folder on the coffee table. Thick, organized, labeled. "What's that?" he asked. "Documentation," I said. "Everything you and your mother have done regarding my finances. Every attempt to restrict access. Every false statement about my spending. Every credit union request. Every spreadsheet." He paled. Actually paled. "You went through my computer. It was open." "That doesn't mean—" "Mark," I cut in, "don't bother. I'm not here to argue." He swallowed hard. "So what do you want?" I met his eyes. "A clean break." His jaw tensed. "You want a divorce." "I do," I said, calm, certain. "And before you say anything, you don't get any portion of my savings. You don't get reimbursement for debts I paid off. You don't get access to accounts you tried to freeze. It's all documented. It's legally mine." He looked like he'd been slapped. "My mom was just—" "I know exactly what your mom was doing," I said. "She saw me as a financial asset. And you let her." He looked away then. And in that silence, I understood something. He hadn't just gone along with her plan. He believed in it. Maybe not from the beginning, but long enough that he didn't know who he was without her voice in his ear. I picked up the folder, pulled out one final document, and handed it to him. "What's this?" he asked. "A summary of every payment I made on our debts. I'll need your signature to acknowledge the source of funds, since you and your mother spent months implying I was irresponsible. If you don't sign, I'll subpoena the bank." He stared at it, stunned. "Why would you?" "Because I'm done letting either of you write the narrative. He hesitated, then signed. No fight, no speech. Just a quiet, defeated scratch of pen on paper. I walked to the door. He didn't follow. He didn't call after me, but my phone buzzed as I reached my car. Linda, I heard what you're planning. We need to talk immediately. I texted back one sentence. Your conditions are no longer needed. She pays her own way. Then I blocked her, for good. My attorney filed the divorce 2 days later. Clean, simple. One-sided in all the ways that mattered. And when everything was finalized, I took myself out to dinner at a little place on South Congress. Nothing fancy, just a meal I paid for with money no one else had a claim on. As I sat there, breathing freely for the first time in months, I realized something. They hadn't lost an asset. They'd lost access to someone who finally remembered her own value. And that's a price they'll feel for the rest of their lives.